Alright guys, what's up? It's me, TheRat, and we're back with Diabotical content. We're going to be talking about the editor, we're going to be talking about some leaks that are in the editor that haven't been revealed yet by the studio, and we'll talk a little bit about what the editor can do for you as either a new mapper or a returning mapper. So let's take a quick look. So as you can see, we have a much more sophisticated editor this time around. It feels like much more of a program rather than just kind of integrated into the game itself. If you played the original Diabotical and you played with the editor, you'll understand what I mean by that. You have this hierarchy set up here where you can kind of drop down various like folders where, you know, props are at the props, spawns in the spawn, light, you'll have all the lights here. If you've got a huge workload and you've got everything dropped down, you can just go up here, click this, collapse all drop downs, everything comes back to a much more cleaner look. You can lock items, hide the items. As you can see down here, weather, it's a little entity and you can select it and then hide it. That way you don't see it, you don't have to mess with it. It's a lot more sophisticated. As you can see, when I unhid it, it came back. Let me just get out of the way here. As you can see here, we also have a properties kind of section for any item or prop that you select, entity or otherwise, sound entities. You have your rotation, position, and size, easily accessible with the flick of the wrist. You're in your edit pad, so to speak, if you're returning Diabotical mapper, and everything that was in the edit pad is now here in the properties. A lot more ease of access. Raw parameters is where you're going to see things that you've input into the item via the console. You could still use the console to input these things, but now they have this thing called the new parameter where you can select it. You've got your key and your value. Your key would be something like right here underscore shadow. Your value would be the true setting. You could still do the 4 cell %1 kind of deal from the original game to see all these things in the console and to get a better idea. Like if you're more familiar with that, this is more for the new people who want to make maps and build in the editor. This is going to make life a lot easier. We also have up here a lot of things going on. We have the global orientation mode, the local orientation mode. Have not played with these that much yet. I haven't gone super deep. I've just kind of scratched the surface. I would assume that these have something to do with, the rotation here on the X, Y, and Z. Global likely will be your default for most things you do, unless there's a special circumstance you want to use local, perhaps based on your positioning and not the global positioning. These right here, you've got the name for your map. You've got the play button, which puts you into the play form. F4 to pull up your kind of edit pad, the editor user interface, which also, I believe, puts you into no clip, or in this game, it's called phi underscore fly. That's PHY underscore fly. And you can also fly while in play mode. That's something you need to set up in the console and bind. The objective editor is something that's, I think, still in the works. When you click on it, nothing happens. More on this later, because we have some objective entities in the editor that maybe when they're on the map, something will pop up and you can look at it a bit more. Nav meshes visibility will show you the navigation mesh, which is more for bots. Obviously, they said they wanted to do a mobile mode, so they needed to have this in the game to facilitate that. In the original game, the nav mesh was a lot more primitive, so maybe it'll be more sophisticated here. Bake quick lighting. This is going to be, obviously, bake your lighting quickly, but then you've got the bake full lighting, which will do a full... As you can see, the game kind of breaks visually, but it's just loading everything. You can't see it, but I had a loading screen there. And then when you load in, I believe the shadows might have changed, and the lighting will be in the game. Settings over here on the side. Have not gone through everything, but there's a lot of stuff here for you to kind of manage your editor experience with, grid size, grid enabled if you don't want to see the grid. And you've got the autosave feature where after X amount of minutes, the editor will save your map as an autosave in case you're not one of those people who likes to save every 5 minutes. The autosave, this is probably 0 and 1. So 0 off, 1 on, and this is the minutes section. So this would be, if this was set to 1, this would be every 10 minutes. There's a lot here. Definitely, if you're going to get into this, just give this a little bit of a check to see if there's anything here you want to adjust. We've also got this up here, the paste mode, camera, cursor, original. Original, I assume, is like the Diabotical, where it's going to be at your crosshair. Camera, I assume, is going to be on your position, wherever your camera is, and then cursor, obviously, where the cursor is on the map. Atmosphere presets are for when they add more atmospheric lighting. And so they kind of have these presets where they will just kind of auto change everything about the map, skybox, fog, and all that stuff. You can obviously save your preset. So if you create a very atmospheric setting for a map and you want to use it for something else, you can save that preset. Control Z to undo things. Control Z and Control V for copy and paste. And Control V and Control C you can rebind to other things in the settings tab. So yeah, we did atmosphere presets final. These are different things that you can kind of adjust to get a better look at your map. We have the lighting, you have emissives, metals, glosses, all this stuff. I'm sure there's a lot of more sophisticated editor people who have played with much more sophisticated editors that would know a lot of this. I still gotta play with these. Here you go. Here's volumes and visibility. You can get a kind of information here on the side. The snap size is going to help you with how far your entities are going to move on the grid. Max 1, and then the minimum is 0.05. These are also on your keyboard from F5 to F8. F5 being 0.01, F6 being 0.05, F7 being 0.25, and F8 being 1. So you can adjust that and move your props and entities accordingly. You could also move your props and entities with the cursor still. The arrow keys. You can use the arrow keys to move them about, as well as home and end. So home and end is for the Z-axis. Left and right on the keys are X, and up and down obviously for Y. They might be they're based on your position on the camera. So if you're facing the X-axis, home and end will go to the X-axis. Left and right will go for Z, right? So up and down right now for Z now, so it is dependent upon where your camera is. But so yeah, that's snap grid, and this grid distance is mainly for setting up how far do you want the grid to pop up. If you do a very low, and yeah, as you can see, a very low, the grid is massive. So very low snap distance, you're going to want a very low grid distance. And for very high snap size, you're going to want a very high grid distance so you can see kind of more of where it's going. I would say the lower grid distance is probably the most efficient. And then you have your translation, your rotation, and your scale, which setting translation as the default, just kind of leave that on, because when you hold shift, you've got the scale, and when you hold control, you've got rotation. You also have the pivot for rotation to determine, I believe, if you have like multiple things selected, you can determine what the pivots are going to be when you turn them. The selection center, so you can turn them on the center pivot. Last selection, so if you selected this item last, it'll pivot on that last selection. And then self-center will be the pivot of the prop or entity. Very sophisticated stuff here, guys, and it's very exciting. So let's get into the content browser really quick before we start diving into the leak related things. F1 gives you your content browser, shows you everything you need to start building maps. You have props, you have the blockouts, you have prefabs that you can save for yourself, entities. You've got a lot of these aren't ready to use yet. I'm gonna say a lot of them are here, but they're not in the game. So play with it, see what works. I would say that the editor right now is much more used for building the map rather than kind of the technical side with the logic and all that. But here at the bottom you can see all the maps that you've created and all the maps that are in the game at an official capacity. I believe the blue represents your maps, the white represents official maps. You can change how big you want these to be. You can change the filter, or no, this is the show textures on missing icons setting. Search bar up here for you can search for things. You can add the filter or the search bar filter. Yeah, they might have a lot of stuff here. They have these arrows for forward and back. I'm not sure how that's going to be used, but yeah. That's pretty much everything about the editor that you need to know to get you jump started to working on content for this game. So what's next? We're going to talk about now a lot of the things that I've found in the editor, a lot of the things that I don't think is ready, obviously, because it's not in the game at an official capacity, but perhaps will be added later down the line once they've kind of worked out the kinks and gotten everything into a good place. First thing we're going to talk about is new suits. If you go into the content browser in your editor, go to textures. Right here, textures. And you can see a bunch of different textures that are used for the game at varying capacities. You've got your entity textures, which are going to be used for when you spawn entities. As you can see, this one says spawn. And if you go into here and get close to it, here's the spawn texture. If you're curious, one more thing about the editor, you want to hold right click to gain control of the camera so you can turn, and then just letting go, you return to mouse cursor. If you open the editor and your cursor is in here, just press right click. It should appear. But getting back to the textures and the new suits, if you go all the way down on this materials or textures tab, you'll see there's a lot of content here for the game as far as the like menus and stuff. As you can see, we have skill tree background, and these are the character icons for the skill trees. So we know about Big Bot here. This Big Bot was featured on the main menu and was also featured, I think, in the trailer a bit. So that's one of the new suits that are going to be coming out, I presume. And then we also have the Weeble right here. We have a Weeble, and the reason why we can say with, for the most part, certainty that these are going to be part of the game is because right here we have skill tree Weeble, and this is the image that would be in the skill tree. And then here we have skill tree Big Bot, and this is the image that would be in the skill tree. We also have cosmetic icons right here, paper hat, bucket. So I'm assuming we're gonna have cosmetics in terms of like maybe the hats or outfits, but these might be in the skill tree as well. These might be things you unlock in the skill tree because they have a locked icon as well as a unlocked icon. The Weeble might be dual wield. As you can see here, the Weeble has the dual wield setup. We have the scout with the bow. We've seen the bow in the files, but the bow is not in the game. So we might see the addition of a bow being given to the scout. But as far as Big Bot, what will they do? We have some other images here that are not in the game. One of them being I think the fire gauntlet, which looks to be some kind of flaming fist. And then we have a fire dash. So these might be used for Big Bot, to some capacity. The other speculative things regarding the new suits are the PFX. If you go into the search bar here and you type in BigBot, you can see some PFX for BigBot are actually in the game, and they do work. And one of them is a ground slam. So as you can see, some of them don't work, but majority of them do work, and it looks like it's some sort of leap and then obviously ground slam, but with different effects that perhaps they're working out what they like the most. Some of these look pretty cool. This is an effect called leap glove. So we know that BigBot has that huge arm. Perhaps he leaps and his arm will have an effect, and then lands with all these effects happening on the ground and whatnot. So that's BigBot, and the new suits kind of leaks where it's in the editor. You can go look at it right now. They're not in the game, and they can't be used at any official capacity right now. But we also have another kind of suit. Okay, so it's not in the textures, but it is in the game files. And so I'll put up an image of that as I talk about it. Okay, so here's the image I'm talking about. It's some kind of alternate variation of the Scout. Speculation on this could be that this is an original concept design for Scout. It could be that this was also used as a template for the border and kind of the character icon that was going to be in the game. This could also be a potential fifth character, since a Wii Ball in theory might make gameplay a little difficult for the small hitbox and the small design. Some kind of another Scout with a scarf and maybe some different items and weapons and abilities might make more sense, but there's nothing in the game, in the editor, textures or otherwise, materials, whatever, that would suggest that this character has any place in the game. This could also be a cosmetic, so we'll have to keep our eyes out for that in the near future. So now we're going to talk about the map editor itself, what it has in terms of leaks and, you know, things that aren't in the game yet. The first thing I want to touch on right out the gate, y'all know me, I'm Mr. Survival. And so instantly when I hopped into the editor, I had to see if there's anything alluding to a survival mode or some kind of, you know, just anything survival. And I have found something. And so you have to use the console to access this stuff, but it should be /game mode rogue_survival. And when you reset, you get this third person kind of look. And it says bot is now in team 1. I believe I have a bot prop. Okay, I don't have a bot prop or entity, but when you ready up with F3, game takes a minute to load. You don't have a weapon, although it does sound like you do with the egg bot, perhaps a melee. But nothing happens, right? Whoops. Nothing happens, and it seems like, okay, if it does have anything going on, it ain't here. But if we reset once again and we get to get ready, we type in game_PVE1, and then we ready up once again. We load in. It says round 1, and spawns start to happen. As you can see, I can't walk through them, so they have collision. They have some kind of hitbox. And apparently the eggbot I'm playing as has a melee. I didn't know that, but yeah, you can kill them. You can also kill them with kill_bots. which will progress the round. So they're here. The mode exists. Survival is coming at some point. And I guess there is a melee. I don't know if it's going to make an official appearance, but yeah, this stuff is here. It's coming. Not sure when, but it's definitely really cool that it's still here, and it's not just survival. It's going to be rogue survival. Okay, so we talked about rogue survival. Very exciting stuff, right? It's very cool. Survival is making a comeback to some degree. We have more information about survival to talk about. You might have noticed when I was showing off the textures that we have spawn volume now as part of the new entities that have been added. We also have wave data. Both of these can be used in conjunction with each other for survival. I've already done some testing with them. If you want to add them to the map, you just type in the console /add spawn volume. And now you have the spawn volume here. It's red. It has the little symbol, or the texture, I should say. And these look like rock creatures on the texture. But they could also be other creatures, which we'll go into in a moment here. We do have information on what the enemies look like and so on and so forth. And so what this spawn volume does is it's basically your typical volume entity, where if you resize, it'll have a volume frame. See if I can resize this a bit more. There we go. So this needs to be used in conjunction, like I said, with the wave data. Once again, to add wave data, it's /add wave data. And we can pull this in, and we can get a look at some more information. So yeah, they have the wave type, generate and spec with party scale, generate and spec no party scale, specified no party scale. Like I said, this is going to be used to determine, based on how many players are on the map, how many enemies should be spawning to make it a decent challenge or whatnot. Wave index, I'm unsure of. Still I need to get more from the devs in terms of what they add to the editor. There needs to be more added to the editor to really be able to play with all this stuff. Since enemies don't necessarily spawn, they spawn in broken textures. Models aren't here. I can't really play with a lot of this stuff to really determine what it's about. But the descriptions kind of give you an idea, right? Index to identify which lineup it belongs to. Wave duration describes, which I just realized describes how long the wave should last before proceeding to the next wave. They give you a little bit of information there. And then here on the spawn volume, we have spawn key volume identifier to know where to spawn enemies. This is related to another entity, I believe. Might be related to sub-objective, maybe not. But sub-objectives are also probably going to be related to the survival mode, where you'll be able to have control areas, interact, shoot object. It's a quest, which you can kind of control how things progress. But here, number of limits, you set that to 1. Set that to 1. Wave index 1. And here we go. It's fixed itself. So yeah, in spawn volume, number of limits, if you set it to 1, you can see the enemy names in the editor. So enemy names for a potential survival mode, we have the Horde, we have the Bomber, we have the Imp, we have Artillery, Blinker Melee, Blinker Range, Charger, Summoner, and Slinky. Using the spawn volume, it allows you to kind of determine, I guess, what's going to spawn in this volume specifically. Number of limits determines how many are going to spawn in that volume. So 1 spawn key volume determines where to spawn the enemies, which basically I believe this needs to be connected You set this to 1, and then you set up another entity which kind of says, okay, we're going to connect it to 1, and then spawn them. I have played with this. I've gotten them to spawn a little bit here. Wave type, when you select one of these, you'll be able to play with more settings. When you select generate, you get a difficulty drop down here. And so there's going to be 5 difficulties for a potential survival mode, which is great. It's great to see such depth that there might be in the game. You can also hit this and you can see you can really get specific with your survival content here, and depending on the editing and how simple it's going to be really a lot more straightforward than it was in Diabotical Survival's the original game. Hopefully this will get more people on board with wanting to be involved in that side of the editor. But yeah, for now, none of this actually works. We don't have any enemies here that we could actually play with and test. Enemy names, we've covered that. The enemies that weren't mentioned in the editor, there are more enemies in the files. We have one of them called Arachne, and I'll put a picture up as I go over these. They are not in the game. They are not referenced in the game. They're in the files, so that could mean that they were either in the game at some point or conceptualized and are no longer in the game. These could also be enemies that are going to be used for the MOBA mode, which I'll touch on a little bit more in a moment. So we have the Arachne. The Arachne looks like it's made up of cubes, to be honest, which is really interesting to me. We also have an entity called the Dragon. It's called the Dragon. It just says Dragon, right? Dragon prop enemy. Again, is this a survival enemy? Is this a MOBA enemy? We don't know, but it looks cool. Again, very cube-like. If you're familiar with the lore of Diabotical, cube bots have been referenced quite a bit. So we also have a few images of existing enemies that were in the files. We have the Horde, again, cube-like in image. Some speculation is that this could be, in terms of lore, some kind of virus going on, based on the particles that are around this Horde enemy. The way it looks, it's reminiscent of some kind of glitch or virus. Scorpio, it's kind of difficult to see, but the Scorpio obviously looks like a scorpion type enemy, so this could be interesting to fight against. We have the Slinky, which is a little tiny little guy, a lot less kind of body mass. We've got another version of the Slinky here. Again, all these enemies look very cube-like, so it'll be interesting lore-wise where they want to take this. We have the Float Giant. This could be a summoner. This could be something else. There's quite a few enemies in these files that have the same names. This is a Titan. We have a Titan here. I'm assuming this is going to be a giant enemy, some kind of boss that you might have to face, either in survival or in the MOBA mode, where maybe each side has a Titan, and the whole objective is for each side to progress on the map to reach the enemy Titan and destroy it. We have the Storm enemy, which looks kind of like an amalgamation of the cubes, with the center being the main damage point. Perhaps the amalgamation surrounding it is going to act as a protective barrier. We have another Slinky design. Slinkies might be the most common enemies. Based on how many Slinkies are in the files, it's possible that they'll be the most common. We have an enemy called the Hydra. So this looks like a 3-headed cube-like amalgamation. Not sure, again, if this could be an elite enemy based on how many heads there are. Again, is this a survival enemy? Is this a MOBA enemy? Some of these enemies could be kind of camp enemies. Based on my experience with MOBAs, there are some camp enemies that you might want to go after. Arachne, I believe we talked about that. I'll put it up on screen again. It looks like it's going to be a spider type, like a little tiny spider type. I'm not sure. It looks like it could be a floater, but we'll have to see. And here's another slinky design for you guys. These are all in the files, by the way. If you download the game, you end up buying it, you can access these by going to your games directory. It's under HTML, Diabotical Rogue UI HTML, and then asset thumbnails. Go to the search bar, type enemy, and you can take a look at all these. Here's another slinky design. This one looks a little bit more weird. Obviously the face, like the way the picture looks, it's really poor, but the face is down below and it looks kind of like it's a worm maybe. And then we have finally big horde top enemy. And it looks like this might be some kind of tank, or this might be the charger. So yeah, these are all enemies that could be in the MOBA more than they would be in the survival mode. The other thing that's interesting is that we also have in the files, when you type in enemy in the search bar, we have a thing that's called enemy crystal cluster. This is probably the most interesting part of the discoveries, is with talk of the MOBA being on the horizon, you know, the question really comes down to what are they going to do when they do the MOBA? Are they going to do a 3-lane push and pull kind of thing? Are they going to do some kind of payload? Are they going to do more Overwatch? Or are they going to do more League? With the enemy crystal clusters, this is what makes me think that these might be the towers that you have to push into with minions and destroy, and then the Titan is kind of the guardian, right, on your side. It could be that the Titan is a camp, a buff of some sort. I know in Smite they have the fire giant that you can kill and get a massive team buff. When you die, you lose that buff. Dragon could also be something like that, so we'll have to see how that plays out. But the enemy crystal clusters are the most interesting part, I think, of the discoveries, because they're set up as if they can be destroyed or potentially used as something of like a tower, but they're not that big, I will say that. So that's kind of what makes it even more interesting, and how they're going to use enemy crystal cluster. This could be used as some kind of currency. We do know that crystals are used as a currency in the current iteration of the game for upgrading your character and progressing the skill tree. So these could be something where in the MOBA you need to collect crystals to upgrade your character and to build into some kind of kit. So we'll have to see what comes of that. Yeah, as far as files, what's in the files, this is kind of all we've got right now. And for anybody curious, is there a game mode in the game currently for the MOBA, since I showed off rogue_survival? I have been doing research, kind of trying to brute force that by coming up with what could possibly the MOBA mode be called, since it was rogue_survival, and majority of the modes in this game are rogue underscore mode name. So nothing has come to fruition on that. I do believe that the mode is here, but I also think that there is no clear what would this name be. Survival was easy because survival existed in Diabotical 1 and it was just called survival as a game mode. So when coming over to rogue and noticing everything has rogue in front of it, rogue_survival was just kind of instantly the guess. So we'll keep digging into that. I would love for people within the community to dig into that and test ideas, come up with things. So yeah, go ahead. Keep trying if you really want to see and crack the code on that. Give it a go. Anyway, I feel like we're coming to a close. The only thing that I really need to talk about now are the old Diabotical assets. Everything from the original Diabotical game is here. We had, I don't know if y'all saw, but we have, as you can see right here in the content browser, we have weapon pickups, or item pickups from the original Diabotical. We have the armors, we have some power-ups too, I believe. Here are the weapons, the shaft, rocket launcher. You can't necessarily use them though. When you place it, it doesn't appear. Nothing is there. Some of them bring up an error symbol. Here's double damage. This one comes up as an error. We have haste, comes up as an error. So these items are in the game. Perhaps purely by the fact that this is technically still the Diabotical editor, and they've kind of built upon it and iterated it through the engine, right? So all that stuff might just kind of be attached to the engine. But one more thing for people who are like dying to get kind of a Quake mode in this game, we have this model here called ArenaBot. Now, obviously, right out the gate, you look at this model and it looks like Chunk. The reason why I bring this up is because Too Good did a stream where he was talking about the Quake stuff, but then he also looked at Chunk's model, talked about the arms and the knees and how it looks kind of like, what is it, Tank Jr. or something. And then it just so happens in the game files, there's a model or prop called ArenaBot that looks just like Chunk. So here's a speculation. This is not confirmed, obviously. We know what nobody knows what's going on with this. But I think if they ever did do a Quake-like kind of mode with the strafe jumping and all that in this game, they would use the Chunk model as the default model for everybody in a match. It's a lot easy to read, obviously, but also I think it's a model that's chunky enough people will enjoy fighting against each other in this model. It's also got the awesome, jump sounds, the grunting. We've talked about the new PFX. Oh, you know what I forgot to talk about? I know what I forgot to talk about, so let's talk about it really quick. This will be the last thing we go over, and it is the Airstrikes. So we have a few items in the game right now. Here's one of them. Airstrikes that can be marked on the ground and, obviously something will fall from the sky. This one's called a cluster. We have a lot of PFX that cover the explosions. We have the bombs themselves that will come down and land, I assume. So that was cluster. We have one called the cone. We have one called the mega bomb. We have a napalm target. This version has the napalm on the ground. We have a projectiles airstrike, perhaps some kind of bullet-based stuff. We have a shockwave airstrike, and then we have a regular airstrike. It's just called Airstrike. An interesting thing is we have one of the airstrikes are called Oppenheimer projectile. To me, that means some kind of a nuke. So I don't know what those are used for. Maybe they're used in warm-up. I feel like people would have talked about that in the community at this point. I haven't seen anybody say anything about airstrikes. It could be used for anything, right? It could be used for the MOBA. Could be kill streaks in the MOBA. There's a TDM mode, but I feel like warm-up utilizes that game mode. I think that covers everything that needed to be talked about in this video. Obviously, when more comes up, I'll make another video and I'll talk about it. I'm so deep in this editor right now. I need to look into more stuff. There's a lot I probably didn't cover that's in the editor that, maybe people can bring up to me and we can go over it in another video. If you are interested in being a part of the mapping community, we have BuilderBots United, which covers both Diabotical and Diabotical Rogue mapping communities. You can go in there to ask for features be added to the editor. You can ask questions. As we get to know the editor a bit more, we'll be including documents and information to kind of go over what you can't do, the limitations, etc. The more the game goes on, we'll have more information about mapping techniques and kind of etiquette in terms of what people expect in like a wipeout map, for example. When and if we get the MOBA editor type stuff, we might be able to talk about, can we make MOBA maps for this game. If and when we get a survival mode, definitely going to cover all the documentation that people need to know to make that kind of content, and so on and so forth. The depths and everything that you can go to using all the entities and whatnot to generate a very customized and unique experience. But yeah, that's going to be it for this video, guys. Thanks for watching. Again, head over to the BuilderBots United Discord if you have any questions or if you want to know more, and I will catch you on the flip side.